Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all the participants. I am Eva Syafitri Nasution. I'm your moderator today of this occasion. I'm very pleased to see you here in our lecture today. I would like to welcome our speaker, Dr. Hasanuddin. Good morning, Dr. Hasanuddin. Selamat pagi. And I would like to welcome our interpreter as well, Mrs. Rumonda Bulan Lubis, ESOS MSI. Good morning, Mrs. Rumonda. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of our lecture is alternative dispute resolution in West Sumatra. I think that it's very interesting. Before Dr. Hasanuddin presenting the topic, I will introduce him first and read his CV. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is his curriculum vitae. Our speaker's name is Dr. Hasanuddin, MSI, Datuk Tan Patih. It's the title of the honor title of himself. He was born in Kepala Hilalang, 17 March 1968. He is a lecturer of Minangkabau Literature and Cultural Study in UNAN. His formal education, all of you can see here. He was graduated from Minangkabau Literature UNAN in 1991, and also magister in cultural studies in UNAN in 1999, and PhD of cultural study grade from UNUD, it's Udayana, Universitas Udayana in 2009. And then his job experience are Secretary of Minangkabau Literature Department in UNAN, Chief Department of Minangkabau Literature here, and then Chief of Quality Assessment Agency, Faculty of Cultural Science here in 2010, and also Secretary of Research Institute in UNAN, Deputy Research of Community Service Institute, and the third Vice Dean in Cultural Studies Faculty, and also the Dean of Cultural Study Faculty in 2017 until 2021. And also his functional experience, such as become an internal auditor, and then a reviewer in of internal research in Universitas Andalas in 2010, and also peer reviewer journal of applied research on higher education, quarter 3 in 2021, and also he is an editor in some journal and also national assessor. Here is the books that he has been written. There are 7 books that has been written. The book are about local wisdom in Minangkabau and cultural problem. Here is the book. You can see how many books that Dr. Hasanuddin has. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's the CV of Dr. Hasanuddin. And before the presentation start, let me tell you how the presentation will go. First, Dr. Hasanuddin will present the material. After that, there will be a question and answer session followed by a conclusion. In question and answer session, you can ask the question directly by tapping the raising hand icon, or you can write your question in the chat box. Ladies and gentlemen, now I will allow to welcome the speaker, Dr. Hasanuddin, to make his presentation. to Dr. Hasanuddin. The floor is yours.
Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua.
May peace be upon us all. Good morning, everyone. And hopefully we are all in a good health and in a good condition.
Saya sangat berbahagia sekali, merasa terhormat, mendapat kehormatan menjadi salah seorang narasumber pada short course, summer short course di Universitas Sumatera Utara ini. Terima kasih.
I feel so honored, and it is a privilege for me to be the speaker and get invited to be the speaker in this summer course held by the Faculty of Law, Universitas Sumatera Utara.
Baik. Pada pagi hari ini kita ingin membicarakan beberapa mind map kita pada kesempatan ini adalah pertama, sesuai dengan judul yang diberikan kepada saya adalah alternatif penyelesaian sengketa di Sumatera Barat, Minangkabau.
First of all, I would like to talk about the presentation that I will convey. It's about mind map, and I have been assigned to give the title for alternative dispute resolution in West Sumatra or in Minangkabau.
Next. Ada 3 entitas yang ingin kita diskusikan pada pagi hari ini. Pertama, berbicara tentang Sumatera Barat. Kemudian,
There are 3 entities that we're going to talk about this morning. The first of all, the entity is West Sumatra.
Kemudian berbicara tentang peranata hukum, hukum adat.
And we are talking about the administrative units like ethnic,
dan
customary law.
Dan kemudian terakhir nanti kita bicara tentang bagaimana pengakuan pemerintah terhadap peradilan adat yang ada di Sumatera Barat, khususnya Minangkabau.
And last but not least, we will talk about the government recognition, and in this case, specifically what we have in West Sumatra.
Next. Berikutnya adalah kita akan mendiskusikan apa sesungguhnya Indonesia. Indonesia memiliki luas wilayah yang sangat luas ya. Ada 7,81 juta kilometer.
And so first of all, we would like to talk about what is Indonesia. So the Republic of Indonesia has a very wide coverage area, and the total coverage area is 7.81 million kilometer square.
Dengan luas daratan 2,01 juta kilometer, lautan 3,25 juta kilometer, kemudian zona eksklusif ekonomi sekian, dengan penduduk yang lebih kurang pada tahun 2019 267 juta.
And the land covers about 2.01 million kilometer squares, sea coverage 3.25 million kilometer square, and economic exclusive economic zone is 2.55, and the total population is about 267 million, and it is based on the date on 2019.
Yang tidak kalah menarik adalah Indonesia itu memiliki bahasa lokal sebanyak 726 bahasa. Kemudian suku bangsa 1.340 berdasarkan Biro Pusat Statistik 2010. Kemudian agama resmi 6, kemudian ras diperkirakan sekitar 4. Dan wilayah hukum adat itu ada 19 sesuai dengan Undang-Undang Dasar 45.
And also, what's interesting about Indonesia are we have local language about 726 local languages, and also we have ethnic groups or tribes about 1,340, and it is based on the statistics database of the Statistics Center Agency in 2010. And also we have official religions, around 6 official religions and 4 races. And also we have customary law, about 19 customary law regions.
Kebinekaan hukum adat yang kaya itu membentuk sebuah mosaik yang indah.
And this rich diversity of customary law forms a beautiful mosaic.
Yang multikultural dan demokratis.
And it is called namely a democratic and multicultural Indonesia.
Dalam keberagaman yang indah itu, hukum adat menjadi alternatif penyelesaian sengketa di samping peradilan negara yang berlaku secara umum.
And in this beautiful diversity, customary law is an alternative dispute resolution as an addition to the generally accepted state courts.
Next. Lalu bagaimana dengan Minangkabau dan Sumatera Barat? Minangkabau adalah sebuah suku bangsa dengan wilayah budaya meliputi Sumatera Tengah, bahkan sampai ke Negeri Sembilan di Malaysia. Dan keberadaan Minangkabau itu ada jauh sebelum pemerintahan kolonial Belanda menguasai Indonesia.
And what about Minangkabau or West Sumatra? So, Minangkabau is an ethnic group with a cultural area of Central Sumatra, and it is up even to Negeri Sembilan, Malaysia, and it has existed long before the Dutch colonial government in Indonesia.
Oke. Kemudian apa bedanya dengan Sumatera Barat? Sumatera Barat adalah sebuah provinsi, wilayah administratif di dalam Negara Kesatuan Republik Indonesia yang dibentuk pada tanggal 3 Juli 1958. Dan Sumatera Barat itu tidak hanya Minangkabau. Memang Minangkabau adalah dominan, mayoritas, tetapi di Sumatera Barat juga ada suku Mentawai dan ada juga suku atau Mandailing yang berbatasan dengan Sumatera Utara dan beberapa etnik migran juga.
Okay, so what is the difference between Minangkabau and West Sumatra? West Sumatra is the name of the province or administrative region within the unitary state of the Republic of Indonesia, which was established on July 3rd, 1958. And within the West Sumatra itself, yes, Minangkabau is the dominant, but Minangkabau is not the only region in West Sumatra. There are also other ethnicity or areas covered in West Sumatra, such as Mandailing, which is really in the boundaries of West Sumatra and North Sumatra, and also we have an area or region called Mentawai.
Ya, kita lihat peta. Itu bintang di tengah itu adalah yang hitam itu adalah pusat Minangkabau.
So as we can see on the map, the little dark or black star is the center of Minangkabau.
Oke. Bagian yang lebih agak gelap, di pertengahan gelap, itu adalah wilayah Sumatera Barat.
And a little bit of darker side around the dark side in the middle, that is West Sumatra.
Kemudian yang diarsir agak terang, itu adalah wilayah Minangkabau sejak awal sampai ke Negeri Sembilan.
And a little bit of gray area nearby, and that's like the color is a bit gray area. That is Minangkabau area, and it is up to Negeri Sembilan, or in the map it's called symbolized by NS.
Lanjut, ini Negeri Sembilan di Malaysia, yang sampai hari ini masih ada pengaruh budaya Minangkabau.
And this is Negeri Sembilan in Malaysia, and up to days, I mean like nowadays, it still has some influence from Minangkabau.
Lanjut. Minangkabau adalah komunitas matrilinear terbesar di dunia. Jumlah komunitas ini mencapai 5.000-an, bahkan 5.000 lebih, 5 juta lebih sesungguhnya. 5 juta jiwa di Sumatera Barat, dan sebanyak itu pula di luar Sumatera Barat karena tradisi merantau.
Okay, this is about Minangkabau. Minangkabau is the world's largest matrilineal community. The number of this community reaches up to 5,000 people. Actually, it's not only 5,000, it is 5 million people. So it reaches up to 5 million people in West Sumatra, and that amount also outside of West Sumatra. So it is up to 5 million people.
Kemudian Minangkabau juga adalah penyumbang sumber daya manusia dominan saat mendirikan Negara Kesatuan Republik Indonesia. 3 dari 4 the founding fathers of Indonesia, seperti ditulis oleh koran Tempo pada tahun 2011 itu adalah 3 dari 4 adalah orang Minangkabau.
So, Minangkabau is the dominant contributor of human resources in establishment of the Republic of Indonesia. 3 of the 4 founding fathers of Indonesia are from Minangkabau, and it is also written in an article in the Tempo newspaper in 2011 that there are the founding fathers of Indonesia are from Minangkabau.
Di antara mereka, lalu apa keistimewaan Minangkabau untuk dibicarakan pada kesempatan ini dalam konteks alternatif penyelesaian sengketa?
So what is the specialties or what is unique about Minangkabau that we need to discuss in terms of the alternative dispute resolution?
Adalah sistem kekerabatan.
It is the kinship system that is unique of Minangkabau.
Sebagaimana kita sebut tadi bahwa Minangkabau adalah komunitas terbesar di dunia matrilineal.
As we can say, and also as I have mentioned earlier, that Minangkabau is the dominant contributor and also the world's largest matrilineal community.
Kekerabatan Minangkabau itu tersusun secara genealogis, mulai dari keluarga yang paling kecil ada Samande, kemudian lebih luas Sejurai, lebih luas Separwi, lebih luas Sekaum, kemudian Sesuku, Sepayung, dan Seindu.
And this kinship, matrilineal kinship of the Minangkabau is formed from the smallest family, which is Samande, and it is going up to Sajurai, Saparwik, Sakaum, Sasuku, Sapayuang, and Saidu.
Kita uraikan satu persatu.
Let's talk about them one by one.
Komunitas terkecil dalam sistem kekerabatan Minangkabau itu adalah disebut Samande. Samande.
So the smallest the smallest community in this kinship system is Samande.
Samande terdiri atas seorang ibu dan bersama dengan anak-anaknya.
Samande consists of a mother and their children.
Himpunan keluarga Samande disebut Sajurai, terdiri atas 3 generasi, yakni seorang nenek, para ibu, dan anak-anak mereka.
So a set of Samande is called Sajurai, and the Sajurai consists of 3 generations, namely a grandmother, mother, and their children.
Sebuah keluarga Sajurai mendiami sebuah rumah gadang. Jumlah kamar rumah gadang adalah sebanyak jumlah perempuan yang ada di rumah itu. Jika ada 9 perempuan, maka jumlah ruang atau kamar di rumah gadang itu akan berjumlah 9 pula.
A Sajurai family stays in a gadang house, or equals to what we call gadang house is big house, and the number of room in this gadang house is as many as the number of women or female daughter in the house. So let's say if they have 9 daughters in the house, that means they have 9 rooms in the house.
Kemudian sebuah keluarga Sajurai dipimpin oleh saudara laki-laki ibu yang dipanggil oleh anak-anak para ibu itu sebagai mama, dan anak-anak ibu disebut kemanakan oleh mamanya.
A Sajurai family is led by a mother's brother who is called by the mother's children as mama, or maybe in English it's called uncle, and the children are called kamanakan or nephew or nieces by their mama.
Lebih lanjut adalah teks lanjutnya. The next. Himpunan beberapa keluarga Sejurau disebut sebagai separwi.
Okay, a set of some Sajurai is called Saparwi.
Ya. Kemudian himpunan Saparwi, coba klik lagi. Himpunan Saparwi itu disebut sebagai sekaum, dipimpin oleh seorang mama kaum.
And a group or a set of Saparwi is called Sakaum, and it is led by Mama Sakaum.
Kemudian himpunan keluarga Sakaum disebut suku, dan satu suku dipimpin oleh seorang penghulu.
And a set of a group of Sakaum will form a Sasuku, and Sasuku is led by penghulu or a head of suku.
Apabila pada suatu kawasan, satu daerah terdapat 4 keluarga yang sesuku atau setidaknya dipimpin oleh 4 orang penghulu, maka daerah itu bisa didirikan sebuah nagari.
And after they form 4 of Sasuku, that means there are 4 penghulu in this one area, then that 4 Sasuku or 4 penghulu can form what they call a nagari.
Klik. Nah, ini Sasuku, Separwi, terus kemudian ini sekaum, kemudian terusnya ini adalah sesuku.
Okay, so if you can see on the slide, there is a color of orange, blue, and red, and that is a Sajurai, Saparwi, Sakaum, Sasuku.
Okay, next. Berdasarkan tadi, maka orang-orang yang sesuku yang terdiri dari 6 generasi itu adalah satu keluarga.
So based on this, a group of Sasuku, which consists of 6 generations, they are called a family.
Okay. Oleh sebab itu, sistem perkawinan di Minangkabau bersifat eksogami suku.
So that is why the marriage system in West Sumatra is called exogamy marriage suku.
Dengan kata lain, orang-orang yang sesuku, yang satu keluarga tidak boleh saling mengawini.
Another word of this is people from the same suku, they cannot marry with one another.
Kemudian perkawinan bukan merupakan urusan 2 orang, seorang laki-laki dan seorang perempuan yang hendak menikah, yang saling mencintai, tetapi adalah urusan 2 kaum, 2 suku atau 2 nagari yang berbeda.
So that is why marriage in West Sumatra is not a matter of 2 people who are only about to get married or like each other or love each other, but it is also a matter of 2 people from 2 clans, 2 tribes, or 2 nagari.
Setelah menikah, kedua mempelai tetap menjadi anggota matri klan masing-masing. Pada lembaga perkawinan mereka, keduanya hanya berperan sebagai duta dari matri klan mereka masing-masing.
The bride and groom remain members of their respective material clans, and in the marriage institution, both only act as ambassadors of their respective matri clans.
Oleh sebab itu, urusan perkawinan menjadi tanggung jawab keluarga komunal, diurus oleh mama mereka masing-masing. Demikian pula, jika terjadi sengketa di antara kedua keluarga duta, suami istri dalam sebuah keluarga kecil, maka yang bertanggung jawab menyelesaikan adalah mama dari kedua belah pihak.
Therefore, marital affairs are the responsibility of the communal family, taken care by the mama of each bride and groom. Likewise, if there are disputes between the 2 ambassadors, so for example, between the husband and wife, then the one who is responsible for resolving the dispute is their mama of both parties.
Next. Ya, selanjutnya, ini slide berikutnya adalah semacam gambaran bahwa antara kedua mempelai, laki-laki dan perempuan itu hanya merupakan dua dari keluarga besarnya masing-masing.
So this slide shows an illustration that the bride and groom act as an ambassador for each of the tribe or as ambassador of each of their clan. And if there is a dispute, the mediator of this dispute is their mama.
Oke. Kemudian untuk slide berikutnya, akan menggambarkan bahwa ada perbedaan antara dua sistem, dua struktur keluarga, yaitu keluarga Batih dan keluarga komunal kaum.
So, and the next slide shows there is a difference of two clan or two family, which are the Batih family and the tribal or communal family.
Next slide. Next. Slide berikutnya. Pada slide ini kita melihat bahwa, ya klik, silakan diklik. Jadi ada dua, klik terus saja, ada dua sistem keluarga yang dikenal di Minangkabau saat ini. Pertama, ada keluarga yang kita gambarkan tadi sebagai keluarga kaum atau extended family.
So in Minangkabau, there are two kinds of system that we have described. The first one is the kaum family that I have mentioned earlier.
Terus klik pada sebelah kanan, itu adalah sistem keluarga Batih atau nucleus family.
And on the right side, if you can keep clicking the slide, it is called Batih family or nucleus family.
Okay. Ya, ini kita lihat bahwa pada sebelah kanan itu secara lebih lengkap adalah sebuah keluarga Batih itu terdiri dari ayah ibu, nenek sesungguhnya tidak ya. Sebelah kanannya itu ada M, itu adalah mama. Jadi dalam keluarga Batih, nucleus family hanya ada ayah, ibu, dan anak-anak. Sementara pada keluarga komunal itu terdiri dari minimal paling kecil itu 2 generasi sampai 3 generasi sampai 8 generasi.
So if you can see on the Batih family on the right side, it is only consists of father, mother, and mama. Actually, a grandmother is also not included there. So that is only in the Batih family. So father, mother, and M is mama, or what I've explained earlier, it's uncle. And on the left side, it is a tribal or communal family. It is wide and bigger and an extended family. It consists at least 2 generations of the family, and it could be up to 8 generations in the family.
Hal yang menarik pada struktur keluarga komunal, ayah yang dilabeli dengan A itu berada di luar keluarga. Ayah bukan bagian dari keluarga kaum pada masyarakat Minangkabau.
What interesting on the left side, which is on the chart of tribal communal family, father, which is symbolized as A on the chart, it is located outside of the family. So he is the external family. So he is not part of the communal or a tribal family. So that is the interesting part in this chart on the left side. Father is outside or external part of the family. He is not part of the communal family.
Berikutnya, di mana posisi penyelesaian alternatif berkaitan dengan sebuah sengketa, sebagai bagian dari sebuah negara yang berdaulat, Minangkabau di Sumatera Barat wajib tunduk di bawah hukum negara. Akan tetapi, disebabkan adanya keistimewaan atau kekhususan hukum adat tradisional yang masih hidup, maka diberikan hak dan kewenangan untuk menjalankannya dalam batas-batas tertentu sebagai alternatif penyelesaian sengketa berdasarkan kearifan lokal yang dimiliki.
So as part of a sovereign country, Minangkabau of West Sumatra is obligated to be subject to state law. However, due to the existence of privileges or specialties of traditional customary law that is still alive, the rights and authorities are given to implement it within certain limits as an alternative dispute resolution based on local wisdom that they own.
Slide berikutnya. Peranata hukum di Minangkabau dapat digambarkan dalam tabel dalam gambar seperti ini. Ada yang disebut dengan limbago nan 10, artinya lembaga, institusi hukum yang 10.
Okay, so in Minangkabau legal institution, as you can see the chart that I shown at the moment, that it has limbago nan 10. So actually, it's the meaning of that word is the law institution 10.
Pada gambar ini terlihat bahwa yang mungkin penting untuk kita nanti akan menjadi bagian dari penjelasan saya adalah pada bagian yang berwarna hijau, Undang Nan Ampe, kemudian sebelah turunannya adalah Undang-Undang Luhak dan Rantau, serta Undang-Undang Nagari.
So what is important in this chart is that it will be related or part of my explanation later on is the green color or the green part, which is Undang Nan Ampe, that means like law 4, and also it's in the tribal word, it's Ulu Luhak Rantau, and also the law of Nagari and also law of Isi Nagari. That will be important for my explanation later on.
Slide berikutnya. Terus diklik sampai selesai. Mohon maaf ini animasi cukup mengganggu ya. Pada gambar ini seperti tadi disebutkan bahwa ada di dalam Undang-Undang Luhak dan Rantau disebut Luhak Bapangulu, Rantau Barajo.
So actually in this chart, like I mentioned earlier, this is Nagari as customary law community unit. There are two types of Nagari. The first one is law of Luhak, Bapanghulu Democratic Nagari.
Okay. Luhak Bapangulu adalah Nagari demokratis. Luhak Bapangulu artinya Nagari itu berada di Luhak. Luhak adalah pusat Minangkabau yang di dalam peta tadi kita gambarkan sebagai bintang, dan pemerintahannya dipimpin oleh para penghulu secara kolektif, kolegial, dan demokratis.
So Luhak Bapanghulu means that Nagari is located in Luhak or the central Minangkabau. And I shown you earlier on the map, it was the black star or the darker star in the middle, and its government is led by the Panghulu collectively or collegial and democratic.
Sebagaimana digambarkan tadi, bahwa penghulu adalah pimpinan matriklan atau kerabat genealogis matrilineal minimum 6 generasi.
And I also have mentioned earlier, penghulu is a matriclan leader or matrilineal genealogical relatives for a minimum of 6 generations.
Sebuah nagari dibentuk oleh minimal didukung oleh 4 suku.
And a nagari is formed by a minimum of 4 sukuan, 4 matriclan tribes.
Kemudian tipe nagari yang kedua adalah nagari aristokratis yang disebut dengan Rantau Barajo.
And the second type of the nagari is Rantau Barajo aristocratic nagari.
Pada rantau Barajo, artinya nagari itu berada di rantau, di luar pusat Minangkabau, dan pemerintahnya dipimpin oleh seorang raja yang merupakan perwakilan Raja Pagaruyung dan bersifat aristokratis.
And Rantau Barajo means the nagari is located in Rantau, or it is outside of Minangkabau center, and its government is led by a king or a representative of King Pagaruyung, and it is aristocratic. And the penghulu or leader of the Matric clan or tribe are under the king.
Bila tadi di nagari demokratis para penghulu adalah penguasa nagari secara kolektif kolegial, pada nagari Barajo ini para penghulu berada di bawah raja.
So unlike the previous nagari, which is Luhak Bapanghulu Democratic Nagari, the penghulu is a Matric clan leader, and it is matrilineal genealogic relative, and the penghulu is collectively collegial and democratic, led by the penghulu. But in this nagari, Rantau Barajo aristocratic nagari, the penghulu or leader of Matric clan tribes are under the king.
Baik. Kemudian kita jelaskan sebuah nagari itu memiliki persyaratan sesuai dengan undang-undang nagari.
So in order to form a nagari, nagari also have requirement according to nagari law.
Jadi di dalam undang-undang nagari itu disebutkan yang pada dasarnya berisi pertama bahwa sebuah nagari mesti memiliki sebuah wilayah kediaman berupa korong dan kampung dengan batas-batas tertentu yang jelas, baik dengan penanda alam seperti pohon besar, sungai, gunung, dan lain-lain, atau penanda yang dibuat oleh manusia seperti bambu, parit, dan sebagainya. Itu disebut dengan bakorong, bakampung.
So a nagari must have the following facilities and infrastructures. The first one is it must have residential area in the form of hollows and villages with certain clear boundaries, either with natural markers such as big tree, rivers, mountain, etc., or a human-made sign in the form of gutter of bamboo or barbed wire. And the area in the circle of the central government is called korong, and while the silent area or hinterland is called village.
Syarat kedua adalah
or which is named according to its conditions such as koto, hamlet, or ratak, or meaning barong bakampuang.
Kemudian syarat kedua adalah penduduk yang berhimpun secara kolektif dalam klan atau suku-suku yang tadi kita jelaskan, sehingga jelas sukunya. Kalau merupakan pendatang juga mesti jelas nagari asalnya, termasuk juga yang non-Minangkabau.
And also the second part or the second requirement is population. These who gather collectively in clans or tribes so that their entity is clear. Even though if there's an immigrant, we need to know where they're from. And it is also clear that the native nagari or where they are the original nagari from, or meaning it's Basuku Banagari.
Oke. Kemudian yang ketiga adalah pemerintahan. Selaku pelaksana roda pemerintahan, baik di bidang legislatif maupun eksekutif dan yudikatif, yang berpusat di balai atau balerung, dan itulah yang disebut dalam undang-undang nagari disebut Babalai Bamusaji.
And number 3 is government. As the executor of the wheels of government, both in legislative field as well as the executive and judiciary, which are centered in the balai or balai room, and in general, it is centered in called what we call Babalai Bamusaji.
Kita melompat ke slide berikutnya. Pada slide ini, kita menjelaskan bahwa nagari adalah kesatuan sosial politik Minangkabau tertinggi.
Okay, so in this slide, I would like to explain that in nagari is the highest Minangkabau social political unit in the nagari.
Nagari dikatakan sebagai sebuah negara karena sifatnya yang otonom dan mandiri, sehingga banyak peneliti menganalogikan nagari sebagai polis atau negara kota di Yunani kuno.
So nagari can be said to be a state because of its autonomous and independent nature. So many researchers make an analogy between Nagari and polis, or what is in city-state in ancient Greece.
Kita bisa bayangkan bahwa jumlah nagari di Provinsi Sumatera Barat pada tahun 1911, belum Sumatera Barat ya, masih dalam pemerintahan kolonial, jumlah nagari adalah 541. Kemudian pada tahun 79 berjumlah 543 nagari.
So we can imagine how many numbers of nagari in West Sumatra, but actually it's not really West Sumatra because it's still in colonial. So then in 1911, there were 541 nagari, while in 1979, there were 543 nagari.
Itu artinya dalam 68 tahun hanya bertambah 2 nagari. Kalau kita perkirakan kapan nagari pertama, itu bisa mungkin sangat sulit dibayangkan, mungkin pada tahun sebelum Masehi mungkin sudah ada nagari.
So you can see that within 68 years, there are only 2 nagari that have been added. So if we can imagine, we can count back how many years was in the gap in the time when it is measured from the first nagari. So maybe it is like long before the BC, the nagari has already been formed.
Dapat dibayangkan pula, pada tahun 1911 itu ada 541 negara-negara kecil dalam satu kawasan yang disebut Minangkabau.
And also, we can also imagine, and it is conceivable, that there were 541 small countries, quote unquote, it's like small countries, in an area called Minangkabau before the Dutch East Indies government control it.
Oke. Selanjutnya, pada masa sebelum kolonial, struktur peradilan nagari itu ada 4. Yang pertama disebut dengan Balai Pasugian, dengan itu pada semacam lembaga penyidikan.
So before the colonialism, there are 4 hall or the Nagari judicial structure that is implemented in before the colonial. The first one, what we call Pasugian Hall, and the main for this institution is for investigate.
Kemudian pada peradilan tingkat pertama itu disebut dengan Balai Panjang.
And the second one, or what we call is court level 1, it is called by Panjang Hall or Balai Panjang.
Kemudian pada tingkat mahkamah tinggi itu disebut dengan Balai Saruang.
And at the Supreme Court level, or Judge Dato' Bandaro Kayo, so it is like a Supreme Court level, the hall or balai is called Saruang Hall, or in Indonesia is called Balai Saruang.
Pada setiap tingkatan itu saya menuliskan ada di Balai Pasugian penyidik adalah Datuk Rajo Api dan tim. Kemudian pada Balai Saruang itu ada hakimnya Datuk Bandaro Kayo. Itu maknanya adalah bahwa pada masa lalu ada satu klan yang sepertinya memiliki fungsi spesifik sebagai penyidik saja atau sebagai hakim saja atau sebagai apa nanti.
Okay, so I just want to explain a bit further that in Pasugian Hall or in the investigation level, there were investigator and the investigator was Datuk Rajo Api and team, and also in the Saruang Hall in the Supreme Court level, there were Judge Datuk Bandaro Kayo. What I mean by those people are, at that time there was a clan or a certain clan who has a very specific function, and what they do only investigate or only as a judge. So that's why I put their names in each of the hall.
Kemudian pada tingkat eksekutor, eksekusi peradilan disebut Balai Katia. Namun,
and also,
silakan.
in the place of execution, there is a hall called Katiak Hall or Balai Katiak.
Saya tidak menemukan gambar atau foto yang relevan dengan ini, tetapi saya pinjam ada foto dari Sialagan, Toba, Sumatera Utara. Tapi bayangan saya adalah mirip-mirip seperti ini.
So unfortunately, for the Katiak Hall or in Balai Katiak, this is a place for execution. I could not find a very suitable picture or an exact picture for Katiak Hall. So that is why this picture is not accurate. So I just borrow and I would make an assumption and it will be look like as this picture. And the picture that I've put here is the picture of Sialagan in Toba, North Sumatra. So I assume the picture will be look similar like this picture.
Slide berikutnya, sebuah struktur peradilan adat yang ada di Luhak 50 kota.
So the next one is the structure of customary law institution that is location at Luhak 50 kota.
Dan pada gambar ini terlihat bahwa ada yang berwarna merah disebut Surau Tuo.
And you can see on the slide, there is a box in red. It is called Surau Tuo.
Surau Tuo adalah lembaga tradisional yang sampai hari ini masih berfungsi untuk menyelesaikan perkara-perkara yang berkaitan dengan ada kalanya pidana, perdata, dan juga persoalan susila.
So this Surau Tuo is an institution or it's a customary institution which has the function to resolve cases or issues related with the criminal issues or civil issue or others issue.
Lalu bagaimana dengan prinsip dan nilai peradilan adat di Minangkabau? Slide berikutnya.
So what about the principles and values of the Minangkabau Customary Court? It is presented in the next slide.
Prinsip pertama adalah bahwa tidak ada keruh yang tidak akan jernih. Ini ungkapan-ungkapan Minangkabau yang khas ya.
So the first principle is the principle of dispute resolution. There is no cloudy that will not clear. So there are saying or words that always exist in Minangkabau, West Sumatra.
Tidak ada kusut kalau yang tidak akan terurai.
No tangles that won't unravel.
Kalau keruh seperti air ya, kalau keruh di muara, jernihkan ke hulu.
Just like water, if it's cloudy in the estuary, make it clear in the upstream.
Seperti menarik rambut dalam tepung, rambutnya dapat, tetapi tepungnya tidak tumpah.
Like pulling hair in a flower, the hair can be pulled, but the flower should not be scattered.
Oke. Seperti memukul ular dalam benih, ularnya mati, tetapi benihnya tidak rebah.
So similar like hitting a snake in a seed or in a seed of rice, the snake dies, but the seed remains and will not fall down.
Kemudian menang jadi arang, kalah jadi abu.
And also there's another term or saying which means wins to charcoal, loses to ashes.
Itu maknanya adalah bahwa di Minangkabau semua sengketa itu tidak ada yang tidak bisa diselesaikan. Tetapi kalau masuk ke peradilan umum, pada pernyataan paling bawah itu adalah kalau ada persoalan perdata, yang menang itu atau yang kalah sama-sama kalah semua sesungguhnya gitu.
So what it means by these whole statements are in Minangkabau or in West Sumatra, there is no such dispute that cannot be resolved. So all dispute must be able to be resolved, and if they cannot resolve the dispute within with the customary law, then they will need to take it to the court, and at the end in the court, the wins or whoever wins the case is not winning. Actually, both party will lose. Either they are winning or losing, both are losing.
Oke. Esensi hukuman ya pada prinsipnya adalah bahwa setiap sengketa itu ada mekanisme penyelesaiannya, ada cara penyelesaiannya.
And the second principle is essence of punishment. So another word for this is whatever disputes we have, there's always a mechanism or ways to resolve these disputes.
Kemudian yang ketiga adalah mengadili, prinsip mengadili adalah kalau semua orang pasti bersalah. Tapi kalau salah kepada manusia minta maaf, salah kepada Tuhan minta ampun, kalau salah langkah ya surut, salah makan muntahkan. Seperti itu.
And the third principle is what we call principle of judgment. This is dispute among human beings. So if there's something wrong or if there's a mistake or wrong to human, ask for an apology. If we have done something wrong to God, we ask for forgiveness. If we do something wrong on our step, go back, and if we wrong to eat, vomit back. So these are the principle of judgment. If wrong, take back. Feet tripping is an antidote. The tongue is pushed by the redeeming goal. So this is the third principle, which is what we call principle of judgment.
Selanjutnya bagaimana prosedur penyelesaian sengketa?
So the next slide is about the procedures of dispute resolution.
Oke. Ada dua prinsip. Pertama, berbilik kecil, berbilik besar. Yang kedua adalah berjenjang naik, bertangga turun.
So there are two main areas or procedures in resolving the disputes. The first one is what we call in translation is small room, big room. The next one is tier up, stairs down.
Terus pada prinsip berbilik kecil, berbilik besar, itu satuan keluarga itu adalah lembaga-lembaga penyelesaian masalah atau sengketa.
So in this first method, or we call like centrifugal procedures, in English it says small room, big room. So each element from number 1 to number 7 is a family unit, and each of these family unit is the institution in resolving dispute.
Persoalan yang ada dalam keluarga kecil, sebentar.
So
persoalan yang ada di keluarga kecil Samande harus diselesaikan oleh pimpinan, oleh seorang ibu. Kemudian kalau tidak selesai baru meningkat ke keluarga kesatuan Sajurai dan seterusnya Saparwi, Sasuku dan sampai ke Sanagari.
So if there is a problem, let's say there's a problem or small problem in a family, which is in Samande. So if there's a problem in Samande family, the one that needs to resolve this problem or dispute is the mother in Samande family, number 1. And if the problems cannot be resolved, then it will be taken higher to the next level, which is inside Sajurai family. And it will go on and on to up to Saparwik family, Sakaum family, Sasuku family, Sapayuang family, up to number 7, Sanagari family.
Oke. Kemudian prinsip kedua adalah metode strategi kedua adalah berjenjang naik, bertangga turun.
And the second procedures in resolving dispute is what we call deliberative procedures. In English, it's called or it's translated as tier up, stairs down. Berjenjang naik, bertangga turun.
Saya mohon maaf pada slide ini ada kesalahan dalam sebelah kiri itu mestinya jenjang naik itu demokrasi Bodhi Caniago.
So I do apologize. There is a mistyping in this slide. So I probably will ask for a correction later on. On the left side, where there's a tier up, the arrow up, it's supposed to be mentioned democracy of Bodhi Caniago instead of democracy of Koto Piliang.
Oke. pada bagian sebelah kiri itu menggambarkan mirip seperti apa yang kita jelaskan tadi, bahwa persoalan yang tingkat samande harus diselesaikan oleh seorang ibu, kemudian tidak selesai maka dia meningkat ke jenjang sajurai dan di situ diselesaikan oleh seorang mama, dan seterusnya adalah laki-laki sebagai pimpinan pada kesatuan-satuan kekerabatan.
So like I said, on the left side is the democracy of Bodhicaniago. The problem needs to be resolved from bottom up. So in other words, from the smallest family. If it's in Samande family, if there's a problem, the problem needs to be resolved by the mother, by a mother. But if it cannot be resolved, then it gets higher to the next level, which is Sajurai, and Sajurai must be resolved by a mama.
Sebelah kanan itu bersifat aristokratis. Penyelesaian masalah bersumber dari raja. Raja, ada bahasa 4 balai dan seterusnya, dan itu bersifat turun, semacam perintah penyelesaian.
And on the right side, it is stairs down. So the problem will be resolved from the up, which is the highest one is the king, is Basa Ampat Balai, and it will go down, tear down to the lower level. So that is why it calls stairs down or aristocracy of Kotopilian.
Selanjutnya kita berbicara tentang pengakuan negara.
The next one we will talk about state recognition.
Oke. Pengakuan negara mulai dari saat Hindia Belanda dengan peraturan-peraturannya yang menyatakan pada dasarnya adalah mengakui peradilan adat yang berlaku pada satuan-satuan masyarakat pribumi.
The first of the state recognition is the Dutch East Indie government, and there are quite a few of regulation there. But basically, this recognition or the Dutch East Indie government recognize that there is a customary law and institution, and it can resolve the dispute among the area. And respect so in other words, they respect customary law as long as it is not conflict with general justice.
Pada pemerintahan negara Indonesia sejak kemerdekaan 1945, sesungguhnya negara juga mengakui satuan-satuan masyarakat adat.
And in Indonesian government, the state also recognizes and respects customary law community units and their traditional rights as long as they are still alive and in accordance with the community development and the principle of the unitary states of Republic of Indonesia.
Walaupun Undang-Undang 48 tahun 2009 tentang kekuasaan kehakiman cenderung mengabaikan peradilan adat, tetapi tetap ada perjuangan-perjuangan daerah untuk bagaimana lembaga peradilan adat difungsikan dalam proses penyelesaian sengketa.
However, in the law number 48 of 2009, the judicial power is exercised by the Supreme Court, and judicial bodies under it in the general court environment tend to ignore the customary law community, but there is still a fight and effort by the local people to make sure that the customary law can also be counted and also can be valid to be exercised in dispute resolution.
Slide terakhir.
Okay, the last slide. So actually, basically, juridically, customary justice is not recognized by law.
Jadi ada 3 ranah yang dimanfaatkan oleh lembaga peradilan adat di dalam kehidupan berbangsa saat ini, yaitu pada sengketa perkawinan, sengketa perdata, dan sengketa pidana ringan.
So there are 3 disputes that is used by the customary law community in order to make an alternative dispute resolution. which are marriage disputes, civil disputes, and also mild criminal disputes.
Pada sengketa perkawinan itu biasanya sebelum masuk ke ranah peradilan agama atau catatan sipil, maka itu diselesaikan oleh pihak keluarga lebih dulu.
So in the marriage dispute, normally if there are disputes among the family related with the marriage, so normally these disputes are resolved between the Samande or separate families and between the parties first before they bring it up to the court.
Pada sengketa perdata, ada kalanya persoalan dimulai dari peradilan adat, baru setelah itu ke pengadilan negara. Tetapi sebaliknya juga, kalau sudah masuk ke peradilan negara, biasanya hakim meminta pertimbangan kepada peradilan adat di lembaga kerapatan adat negari.
In the civil dispute, normally it started with the customary justice institution and also the state court. And if the case is brought up to the state court and it cannot be resolved, and still the judge will ask some consideration and also some insight from the customary justice institution in order to decide these civil disputes.
Pada sengketa pidana, khususnya pidana ringan, biasanya sengketa langsung diambil oleh lembaga peradilan negara melalui polisi, kejaksaan. Tetapi pada kasus-kasus tertentu banyak masyarakat adat yang meminta kepada polisi, kejaksaan, atau sebelum sampai ke kejaksaan atau pengadilan, masyarakat adat meminta agar kami selesaikan lebih dulu.
So in the mild criminal dispute, normally this case will be handled and will be settled and resolved by the state court or by the authorities and also by the police. But if the people ask for the case, if it's not been resolved by the police yet, they will ask for the customary institution to solve the problem first before it can be taken by the district court and before it will be resolved by the police and by the prosecutor.
Jadi untuk itu ada alternatif membuat MOU di antara institusi peradilan adat di negari dengan institusi pengadilan negara.
So that is why, to that end, there will be they will ask for an MOU or memorandum of understanding between the customary justice institution and also with the state court, where in this case is the police and the prosecutor.
Terima kasih.
That is all the presentation from me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for Dr. Hasanuddin for the presentation and how the great presentation that he already shared to us. And then, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker has been presented the material, and now is the time for question and answer session. I would like to have 3 questions from all the participants. Here I don't see the question in the chat box. Maybe the participant want to ask a question directly, you can raise your hand and ask some question. Silakan Bapak Ibu, adakah pertanyaan yang ingin ditanyakan kepada narasumber kita yang telah menjelaskan materi dengan sangat luar biasa dan sangat menarik sekali. Kita sudah mendengarkan tentang alternatif dispute resolution dari Sumatera Utara, yaitu Rakut Sitelu. Sekarang kita mendapatkan materi baru tentang bagaimana alternatif dispute resolution di Sumatera Barat. Bagi Bapak Ibu, dipersilahkan. To all the participants, please answer your question by raising hand. Thank you.
Recording.
Okay. Okay, the first one came from Zihad. Zihad want to ask the question directly to Zihad. Please ask your question. Time is yours.
Baik, terima kasih. Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi.
Saya mohon izin bertanya, ketika penyelesaian alternatif penyelesaian sengketa di khususnya di masyarakat Sumatera Selatan, Minangkabau, tadi telah disebutkan bahwa terdapat adagium yang kurang lebihnya berbunyi pada saat sengketa diselesaikan di dalam pengadilan, seyogianya tidak ada pihak yang menang, seyogianya kalah. Saya mohon izin bertanya, lantas bagaimana prosedur penegakan atau pemaksaan perihal ganti rugi ataupun sesuatu yang menjadi hak bagi seseorang di dalam suatu perselisihan. Jika di pengadilan berhak memaksakannya melalui putusan dan menggunakan alat kelengkapan negara seperti kepolisian. Namun jika di dalam alternatif dispute resolution ini, bagaimana cara pemaksaannya atau bahwa hasil dari penyelesaian sengketa itu akan dilaksanakan secara konsekuen. Begitu pertanyaan dari saya. Terima kasih sebelumnya.
Oke, baik. Jadi di sini Zihad dari Universitas Brawijaya bertanya mengenai secara singkatnya seperti ini, bagaimana prosedur ganti rugi ketika ada perselisihan di dalam masyarakat Minangkabau pada khususnya melalui alternatif dispute resolution, dan bagaimana upaya paksa agar salah satu pihak ketika ingin yang telah mengganti rugi itu dapat membayarkannya kepada orang yang berselisih dengannya. Mungkin seperti itu ya secara garis besarnya, Zihad. Kepada Bapak Hasanuddin, kami persilakan Pak untuk menjawab.
Baik, terima kasih Zihad dari Universitas Brawijaya, luar biasa. Jadi di dalam prakolonial ya, sebelum Minangkabau itu menjadi bagian dari negara pemerintahan kolonial Belanda, kemudian dilanjutkan bagian dari negara Indonesia. Sesungguhnya mereka memiliki tingkatan-tingkatan peradilan seperti digambarkan tadi, sampai ada eksekusi seperti yang saya bayangkan, karena tidak cukup bukti untuk menyampaikan secara eksplisit. Karena orang Minangkabau bersifat memiliki tradisi lisan dibanding tulisan. Bu Eva, apakah ini juga diinterpretasi, diterjemahkan?
Ya Pak, mohon
Ya,
saya izinkan
akan diterjemahkan Pak.
Ya.
Okay. First of all, I would like to ask the questions. So I will say the questions again. These questions come from Zihad, Universitas Brawijaya. The questions is, what is the procedures of the claim in the court if there is in the alternative dispute resolution, and how would the procedures of forcing to pay for the parties if they need to pay or they need to claim and they need to pay or get the reimbursement for the party who claim the case. Okay. Because like we have mentioned earlier that in the court there will not be a win-win solution, so everyone will lose. So the answer from Bapak Hasanuddin is prior to the colonial in the Dutch East Indies level, I mean like government, actually there were already a level of solving the dispute, and there's also a level of justice like has been shown before with the four levels from the investigator or from investigation up to the execution. But unfortunately in West Sumatra, the case is always been resolved in verbally, not in written. Silakan Pak Hasan.
Oke. Jadi prakolonial dan pra Indonesia, Minangkabau memiliki institusi peradilan yang sampai kepada tingkat pemaksaan.
Also, in the Dutch East Indies up to the Indonesian government, we do have a justice, or we do have the court for the judicial institution, and up to the what we call enforcement, or have to make force or have to pay all the claim.
Ya. Kemudian ada versi yang kedua. Jadi kalau tadi sampai ke eksekusi seperti di Sialagan itu memang kalau pidana sampai dibunuh juga dan sebagainya. Tetapi ada lagi di negari yang demokratis justru diusir keluar dari negari. Nah, seperti itu.
So like the second version, like we have also mentioned, the level or the leveling for the prosecution or for the justice is up to the execution, like what I've shown in Sialagan, the picture of the Sialagan. And also in this case, for the criminal case, it is also can be up to sentence of death or murder. But also if there's a case of a criminal case, it also can be kicked out from the democracy nagari.
Saat ini ketika Minangkabau sudah menjadi bagian dari sebuah sistem pemerintahan negara, maka sifat yang bisa dijalankan oleh peradilan adat adalah sebatas bagaimana menyelesaikan dalam bentuk perdamaian. Ya, kalau silakan.
And nowadays in Minangkabau, because Minangkabau is now part of the Indonesian government, so the customary justice institution can only resolve the case up to get the peace maker of peace solution.
Iya, ketika perdamaian perdamaian itu adalah kalau di dalam terjadi semacam pidana ringan, mungkin ada denda untuk membayar perbuatan. Kemudian kalau perdata salah ambil, tadi dikatakan mengembalikan. Salah kepada manusia minta maaf, salah kepada Tuhan minta ampun.
So for peace in this case, like peaceful resolution in this case, means if it's related with the mild criminal dispute, it will be like a sanction or pay penalty for what they act, or for the attitude for the action. And if it is for civil dispute, like I mentioned earlier and on the slide, is if you take something, give it back. If you make something wrong, ask for apology, and if it's wrong to God, ask for forgiveness.
Manakala peradilan adat tidak mampu menyelesaikan dalam bentuk memperdamaikan, maka itu dipersilahkan masuk ke pengadilan negara.
And in the case, the customary justice institution may not be able to achieve peaceful result, then the case or the dispute will be taken higher to the state court.
Oke, itu jawaban saya, Zihad.
That is my answer. Hopefully you can answer your question, Mr. Zihad.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hasanuddin, for answering the question. That was a great answer. So the second question came from in the chat box. Came from Vita Sita Emia from Faculty of Law, Universitas Sumatera Utara. Was asked about apakah ADR di Sumatera Barat ini masih tetap eksis dan dilakukan hingga sekarang? Jika ada, apakah ada perubahan signifikan antara mungkin maksudnya adalah antara ADR pada masa lalu dengan sekarang ini, apakah ada perubahan?
So yeah, there's a question. So is the alternative dissolved resolution in West Sumatra still exists and still valid up to now? And if it is there any significant changes? What I mean in significant changes, if there's a significant changes from current situation with the previous or in the pre-colonial situation. Thank you.
Baik, ADR di Sumatera Barat seperti juga sesungguhnya tergambarkan melalui jawaban kepada Zihad tadi, bahwa memang masih ada. Seperti di Taram, seperti yang ada di dalam slide, itu masih berlaku sampai sekarang. Bahkan ada pejabat pemerintah daerah yang disanksi oleh lembaga adat Surautu tadi.
Yes, it is still valid and it still exists in West Sumatra. And I also can relate with my answer with Zihad previously. And it is still valid and still exists, as you can see also in Taram area and on the slide I've shown you before. And actually, just recently, there is an officer in the government got sanction or penalty through the customary justice institution.
Perubahan yang terjadi memang ada. Kalau dulu memang peradilan itu bersifat otonom, tetapi ketika sudah menjadi bagian dari sebuah pemerintahan negara, maka dibatasi hanya sebatas mengupayakan perdamaian. Kalau tidak bisa, ya peradilan negara lah yang menjadi solusinya.
And according to the changes significantly, actually it's not significant, but yes, there are some changes from the previous existence and the current situation. Well, now, well, it used to be autonomous principle, right? But now because Minangkabau has become part of the country and also this customary justice institution become part of the government regulation. Now the authority of the customary justice institution is limited to only making an effort to have peaceful resolution. And so they try to make an effort to get a peaceful result or solution. And if the peace resolution cannot be achieved, then the case or the dispute needs to be taken to the state court and to be resolved by the state court.
Itu jawaban saya untuk Vita.
And that is my answer for Miss Vita.
Okay, thank you. And then the third question is from Hezron.
Yeah.
Hezron is from, okay, Hezron is a student here. He said that izin bertanya, bagaimana bila aturan nagari, maksudnya nagari di sini bersinggungan dengan peraturan pemerintah? Bagaimana pandangan Bapak Dr. Hasanuddin tentang hal tersebut?
So the next question comes from Hezron. Hezron is a student here, and he would like to ask, what if the regulation or the Nagari regulation, and in this case is the dispute resolution from Nagari, is clash or overlapping with the regulation from the government? So what is your point of view and how do you see this, Mr. Hasanuddin? If there's a regulation that's overlap or actually it's clash or maybe contradict with the regulation of the government. Thank you.
Terima kasih Hezron. Ini sudah karena sudah menjadi bagian dari sebuah negara, maka peraturan nagari tidak boleh bertentangan dengan hukum negara. Oleh karena itu, dalam hal-hal yang misalnya hukum pidana, itu kan merupakan ranah peradilan negara. Tetapi untuk bisa ditarik oleh nagari, maka dibuatlah semacam MOU antara pemerintah nagari dengan kepolisian agar persoalan-persoalan kecil seperti maling, mencuri kecil-kecilan, perkelahian antar saudara itu diselesaikan dulu oleh peradilan nagari.
So as Nagari is become part of the Indonesian government, so the regulation of Nagari cannot be overlap or contradict with the regulation of the state court. So especially if it's in regards with the criminal case or criminal dispute, so it must be solved by the state court. But however, in the Nagari court or in a Nagari resolution, if they want to resolve a dispute in a Nagari, they will make an MOU or a memorandum of understanding with the state court, in this case with the police or the prosecutor. And so that's why if there's a minor criminal or let's say a mild criminal case such as stealing, fighting, or just argument or disargument, then it can be resolved by the Nagari court or by the customary justice institution of the Nagari.
Oke, itu jawaban untuk Hezron.
And that is my answer for Hezron.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is from Mrs. Bayu Vita. Apakah tokoh-tokoh di dalam proses alternatif dispute resolution di Minangkabau ini dipilih berdasarkan keturunan atau berdasarkan hasil musyawarah para tokoh adat atau berdasarkan garis keturunan? Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih.
So please, may I translate that first, Bapak? So the question comes from Bayu Vita. The leader in the alternative dispute resolution process in Minangkabau is chosen or selected by the descendants, or is it selected based on the deliberation of a leader of the customary leaders, or is it based on who their ancestors are? Thank you very much.
Baik, sesungguhnya ada problem dengan keberadaan Nagari pada saat ini, Bayu Vita. Jadi ada problem sesungguhnya ketika telah terjadi transformasi yang luar biasa selama 200 tahun, sejak pemerintahan kolonial Belanda sampai pemerintahan Indonesia sampai hari ini itu sudah 200 tahun proses intervensi negara terhadap Nagari, sehingga terjadi banyak persoalan.
So actually there has been problem, honestly, for Ms. Bayu Vita, thank you for the questions. There has been a problem for Nagari currently because it has been transformed for 200 years. As we can know that this Nagari has been transformed long before from the Dutch East Indies colonialism and up to now in Indonesian government. So there has been a lot of intervention from a Nagari into become part of the Indonesian government.
Walaupun demikian, jadi secara ideal dan itu masih berlaku hingga hari ini, proses pemilihan itu ada dua macam, seperti kita gambarkan tadi. Ada yang demokratis dan ada yang aristokratis.
So ideally, however, despite all the problems regarding the transformation or the intervention, there is idealism that is still occur currently in the process of the selecting the leaders of the alternative dispute resolution leaders. And like I've mentioned earlier, there are two ways in the selecting process, which are democratic process and also aristocratic process.
Dalam proses demokratis itu dipilih berdasarkan kompetensi orang yang ada di negari. Kompetensi.
Okay, in the democratic process, the leaders are selected or chosen based on their competency. So once again, they are selected through their competency as the leader.
Pada negari yang aristokratis, foto pilihan itu memang dipilih berdasarkan keturunan. Walaupun secara akal sehat belum memenuhi kompetensi yang diperlukan. Gitu.
And however, the aristocratic process, the leaders, especially in the aristocratic foto pilihan, the leaders are selected or chosen based on their ancestor or descendants, or like in this case, who their ancestors are, which actually logically it doesn't really make sense because they're not necessarily has the competency to be the leader.
Walaupun demikian, keduanya tetap memiliki mekanisme bagaimana keputusan itu dihasilkan sebaik mungkin. Dengan melibatkan banyak unsur. Ada unsur ulama, ada unsur pemuka adat, dan ada unsur ilmuwan yang disebut dengan cerdik pandai.
But however, both mechanism, in order to make decision, they always consider and always hold the best decision to be taken, and the decision is also involving many other parties such as religious leaders and also public figures and also scientists.
Oke, itu jawaban saya untuk Bayu Vita. Terima kasih.
And that is my response for Ms. Bayu Vita. Thank you very much for your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hasanuddin, for the great question. The great answer. Dr. Hasanuddin has answered the question clearly, and I hope all of you already understand and about the answer. Saya berterima kasih kepada Dr. Hasanuddin untuk jawaban-jawaban yang sangat luar biasa, dan terima kasih telah menjelaskannya dengan sangat baik. Ladies and gentlemen, before closing the lecture, before closing the lecture, there is one more answer I have read in chat box from Afifa Rangkuti. Bisa ya Pak, mohon izin satu lagi pertanyaan. Izin bertanya kepada Bapak narasumber, bagaimana struktur organisasi Nagari ini?
So actually there's one more question. The question is, what is the structure of this Nagari? So that is the questions. Last question actually for today. Thank you very much. I hope Mr. Hasanuddin can answer these questions.
Baik, terima kasih. Pertanyaan luar biasa dari Afifa Rangkuti ya. Sesungguhnya struktur Nagari itu, organisasi Nagari itu sudah berkali-kali mengalami intervensi tadi. Jadi yang ideal sebelumnya adalah benar-benar, kalau saya mengatakan negara Indonesia yang sejak awal berdiri itu adalah merupakan format demokrasi Nagari. Seperti itu.
Thank you very much for Ms. Afifah Rangkuti. So actually regarding with the Nagari structure, this Nagari has been experiencing intervention for so many times actually. So ideally, like I mentioned, Indonesian government or Indonesian as a country with all this democracy, actually from the beginning, the formation or the establishment of the democracy of Indonesia has taken the democracy of a nagari. So that is like the Indonesian government, Indonesian country has a similar and has the same basic of the nagari democracy.
Mengapa saya katakan demikian? Konsep demokrasi nagari adalah kekuasaan ada di tangan rakyat, yaitu anak kemenakan dalam sebuah suku dilaksanakan oleh MPR. MPR itu terdiri dari wakil-wakil dari rakyat, dan di dalam lembaga MPR nagari itu adalah yang disebut dengan kerapatan nagari, itu adalah para penghulu. Gus adalah pemimpin dari suku-suku dan sekaligus wakil dari suku-suku tersebut. Artinya juga adalah wakil rakyat.
So the reason why I say the Indonesian is very similar with the nagari democracy is in the concept of nagari democracy is it is all the representative and the highest authority is on the kamanakan, or in this case it's like nephew or nieces, and the highest authority is on the people. So people in the nagari democracy is kamanakan or anak kamanakan. So that is why it is very similar. And also in nagari democracy we have people's representative, and this people's representative is the closeness of a nagari family. So this is a very close nagari, and this what we call in bahasa Indonesia is karapatan nagari. So it's like a closeness of a nagari, and it is led by penghulu. So penghulu in this nagari democracy is not only the leader of a tribe, but they're also the leader of the people's representative.
Jadi dalam struktur itu, kerapatan nagari, kerapatan penghulu di atas sebagai majelis permusyawaratan, mereka memilih secara musyawarah mufakat kepala negari, kemudian juga memilih lembaga peradilan. Jadi semacam trias politika tradisional Minangkabau adalah di nagari.
So another word, it's like penghulu as the people's representative. They are the highest level in holding the authority, and the penghulu will choose those the nagari head or kepala negara, and also they will choose the people, and also for the deliberation in making decision and making a authority for their for the benefit of the people.
Sekarang ini sejak ada di dalam negara Kesatuan Republik Indonesia mengalami berbagai perlakuan, pada tahun 79 berdasarkan Undang-Undang Nomor 5 tahun 79 itu terjadi penyeragaman sistem pemerintahan desa se-Indonesia. Nagari menjadi desa, mengikuti struktur pemerintahan desa di negara kita.
And also based on the regulation, like in Indonesian government nowadays, so there has been a transformation and also intervention. So based on the law number 5 in 1979, so all villages needs to be standardized according to the structure of Indonesian regulation. So that is why now the village of Nagari now become Nagari now become a village, and this must follow the rules and the structure of what has been written and stated in the stipulation of Indonesian government.
Ya. Sekarang masih tetap mengikuti struktur pemerintahan desa sesuai dengan Undang-Undang Nomor 6 tahun 2010 tentang desa. Ada kepala negari, dan ada badan musyawarah nagari, badan musyawarah desa ya. Sementara yang selama ini menjadi MPR-nya, yaitu para penghulu di dalam lembaga permusyawaratan itu berada di luar pemerintahan. Sehingga dalam tanda petik, lembaga penghulu itu termandulkan begitu.
Nowadays, actually, the structure of a village, of a nagari, it is they follow the rules or the regulation based on law number 6 of 2010, which is the head of a nagari, and its rules the head of a nagari, and also the deliberation agency or institution in a village. And there's also what I call earlier, which is the people's representative, and it consists of penghulu, and this penghulu used to be able to take an authority, but nowadays this people's representative or the organization of a penghulu is outside of the government, so they are independently, they are not including in the government regulation of a nagari. So that is why the role of the penghulu or the role of people's representative consists of penghulu, it's not really as powerful, or it has powerless. I could say the people's representative consists of penghulu, nowadays considered as powerless.
Dilema hari ini adalah upaya untuk menghidupkan kembali struktur pemerintahan nagari sesuai dengan kearifan lokal itu sudah diupayakan, dan sesungguhnya Undang-Undang Nomor 6 Tahun 2010 tentang pemerintahan desa itu memfasilitasi, karena ada desa dan ada desa adat, dan itu sudah diturunkan menjadi peraturan daerah nomor 7 tahun 2018 tentang nagari, dan itu berupaya mengembalikan nagari ke struktur yang ideal, tetapi mengalami kendala ketika masyarakat di daerah, di kabupaten kota, di nagari-nagari sudah terlanjur nyaman dengan kondisi hari ini.
And also, this is kind of a dilemma in Minangkabau or in West Sumatra, because in order to bring back alive the structure of nagari in regards and also related with the local wisdom, well, actually based on the regulation number 6 of 2016, it is also support, there is a customary village. So in that regulation, it also supports a village, and also it's stated and stipulate about customary village. So actually, it also can support and also can bring back alive or the structure of a nagari. And also, according to the regulation, regional regulation number 7 of 2018, it says that a village in a region can make a customary village and can bring back alive the customary village. So that is ideally we can bring back that customary village. Unfortunately, people in the village nowadays has already been comfortable with the current situation, according to the Indonesian government regulation. So that is kind of dilemma. They want to bring back alive, but there are some villages already been comfortable and convenient with the current situation based on the Indonesian regulation, based on the Indonesian government regulation.
Kalimat terakhir saya adalah kita ingin Indonesia itu tetap Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. Bhinneka Tunggal Ika adalah ibarat sebuah taman bunga yang baru bermakna kalau aneka warna. Ibarat sebuah mosaik, ya dia baru indah kalau dia multiwarna.
So my last word for this is we would like to have Indonesia. Like Indonesia has a Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which is diversity in unity, and we would like to have the more color, like it's like a garden. The garden will be so beautiful if it has a lot of color and it has colorful flowers in it. And also a mosaic of Indonesia, it will be beautiful. And the beauty of Mosaic Indonesia only happens when it has colorful and a lot of colors in it.
Terima kasih.
That is all from me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hasanuddin, for answering the question. So there are 5 questions that have been answered by Dr. Hasanuddin well. This is the last session for question and answer session. Now we are going to the next session. Before closing this lecture, there will be a word appreciation from participant and also the closing remarks from Dekan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Sumatera Utara. But now we are going to hear the word of appreciation from the participant. I will allow Mrs. Bayu Vita to say a word of appreciation of this summer course. To Mrs. Bayu Vita, the floor is yours.
Oke, terima kasih. Semoga terdengar suaranya ya.
Ya, terdengar jelas.
Iya. Sebenarnya saya berterima kasih sekali pada pihak Universitas Sumatera Utara atas kesempatan summer course kali ini, karena saya akhirnya bisa mengikuti kuliah alternatif dispute resolution secara formal.
So I would like to say thank you very much, first of all, for Universitas Sumatera Utara for this opportunity to make and join this summer course so that I can learn and know a lot more regarding with alternative dispute resolution in North Sumatra.
Nah, dari beberapa kuliah, ternyata saya juga di sini mendapatkan paling tidak dua suku terbesar di Indonesia juga ya, untuk yang Karo dan Minangkabau di pelaksanaannya. Dan
from this lecture, and in these lecturers, I also gained from 2 main tribes in Indonesia. Well, in this case, the 2 main tribes from Sumatra, which are Karonis tribe and also Minangkabau.
Ya, dan ini keterkaitannya dengan pekerjaan saya. Ini karena saya dari peneliti dan pengetahuan ini saya perlukan pada saat ke lapangan, dan ini ternyata salah satu alternatif pada saat ada konflik di masyarakat, dan ini amat sangat membantu saya. Terima kasih sekali.
And also this is related with my work. I'm a researcher, and this finding and also these inputs from the summer course will be highly needed and required to my field when I do a research, and also I can use this as an alternative ways in dispute, in conflict resolution or in dispute resolution, and I can use these ways as an alternative to resolve conflict on the field. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih, Mbak.
Okay, thank you very much for Mrs. Bayu Vita, who has given a word of appreciation of this summer course. Thank you very much. Now, it's time to the next session. That is, there will be a closing remarks from Dekan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Sumatera Utara. Okay. Okay. Now there will be a closing remarks from Dekan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Sumatera Utara. To Mr. Dr. Mahmud Siregar, SHM Hum, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam sejahtera, salam sehat bagi kita semuanya. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. To our honorable guest speaker, Dr. Andus Hasanuddin, MSE, honorable vice deans, honorable professor and lecturers, and all participants. We have reached the end of the 2022 summer course program by the Faculty of Law, Universitas Sumatera Utara, with the theme Alternative Dispute Resolution, Rakut Situlu in Karo. It is an honor for me to give disclosing remark after a successful program that involved participants from 5 countries: Malaysia, Malagasy, India, the Philippines, and the several universities in Indonesia. To date, there have been more than 163 registered participants for our summer course program. 33 of which are foreign students from Malaysia, Malagasy, India, England, and the Philippines. To our guest speaker, Dr. Andus Hasanuddin, MSE from University of Andalas. Thank you, Prof, for giving us your time. It was a great pleasure to share and learn about ideas, information, and interpretation on alternative dispute resolution in West Sumatra. As mentioned in the opening session of our program, this activity is an opportunity for participants to do comparative studies and broaden their horizons about dispute resolution. For us, USU, this is an opportunity for us to expose the local wisdom in North Sumatra and promote customary law so that it can be better known internationally. To all participants who have taken part in this session, I hope you all got a lot of benefits, knowledge, and new insight. I also hope that this can become a stepping stone to expand further academic collaboration, such as joint research, study visit, or other activities. We are also grateful to everyone who have been involved in the summer program. While there are too many to name individually, among them are staff member of summer course, steering committee under the leadership Dr. Muhammad Eka Putra SMH as the Vice Dean for Research, Community Service, and Collaboration, who have spent time and effort for the summer course. And finally, of course, we are also thankful toward our all speaker, Professor Ainul Zaria binti Maidin, International Islamic University, Malaysia, Professor Akmal Handi Ansari Nasution, UP Jindal Global University, Dr. Andus Hasanuddin MSE, Universitas Andalas, Mr. Matthew Jusdrason, former researchers to the World Bank, Professor Runtung Stepu, Professor Rosnida Sembiring, and Dr. Maria Kaban from Universitas Sumatera Utara, as well as hosts, moderators, and the translator who have been supporting us. Everyone, thank you, and please look forward to our next event. Best wishes for your health and safety. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for Dekan Universitas Sumatera Utara, Mr. Dr. Mahmul Siregar, SHM Hum, who has given the closing remarks from this summer course. Ladies and gentlemen, finally we come to the end of this lecture. Before closing the lecture, I want to ask you to turn your camera on and to take a group photo. Please, to all the participants, please turn your camera on. Okay, I will count it down. 1, 2, 3. Once again, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank to the speaker, Dr. Hasanuddin, for the informative and interesting presentation. And I want to thank Dr. Mahmud Siregar SIM Hum, who has given the closing remarks. And also I want to thank to Mrs. Bayu Vita for giving an appreciation word. And also I want to thank for all the participants for active participation. Finally, applaud for the speaker and all of you. Thank you. I will look forward to see you in the next summer course. And I will close the summer course with Hamdalah, Alhamdulillahirabbil Alamin. I wish you all have a pleasant day and thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih semua.